And now it's my pleasure to welcome Reverend Paul Johnson, who will be speaking with us about tasting the wine of astonishment. Reverend Johnson.
Thank you, Beth. We had 9 folks at our Building Your Own Theology group yesterday morning, and you're welcome to join us again on December 16th. We shared our religious autobiographies this last Saturday, just yesterday, and we'll be doing a little bit more of that and then delving into the whole issue of what constitutes religious experience. So feel free to join us, 11 o'clock on the 16th. Several years ago now, I came across a sermon title by the late UU minister Harry Schofield, and I just loved it. Tasting the wine of astonishment. And I imagined maybe having a sip of my favorite wine, Ménage à Trois, and as I experienced awe and a mystery of wonder about the nature of things. I assumed a positive meaning for the word astonishment, such as amazement, awe, and wonder, which I'm really into. But of course, there's another meaning for the word as well, suggesting dismay, consternation, shock, or reeling. Well, I had never come across this verse from the Bible before. It's from the Bible. And so I looked it up in Psalm 60, and I was crestfallen because it was not a positive meaning of the word term of the word at all. It thou hast made thy people suffer hard things. Thou hast given us wine to drink that made us reel, said the Revised Standard Version. A little different from the King James, which was, thou hast made us to drink the wine of astonishment. But it so happens that the verse refers to a devastating time among the Israelis, the disaster of war, or the disaster of an earthquake or something similar. And so it has a negative meaning for astonishment. Now, my father was a preacher who always tied his sermon to a biblical text and to a proper meaning of that text. He said it's important to have proper biblical exegesis, so you're giving that truth to people. Well, I'm going to have to say, sorry, Dad. But this morning I want to use this text as a pretext for considering a positive meaning for the word establishment. My father always said, a text without a context is a pretext. And so I plead guilty this morning. But I've contemplated this verse from Psalm 60 many times, and I kind of imagine it, enjoying my favorite wine, and then recollecting on those aspects of life that have filled me with awe and wonder and astonishment. And first I want to tell you where this really came into effect for me was at the end of the Cold War in 1989. From my earliest years, I always feared nuclear holocaust. Has that been the experience of some of you going back? I remember in elementary school, and even as a kid, I didn't think this would be too effective. Duck and cover. In other words, go under your desk. Well, how's that going to help? But then I think they got a little more realistic, and they brought us all down into the sub-basement. And we lined up on all sides of the walls with our heads between between our knees and our hands behind our head in total silence as we imagine what nuclear attack would be like. And even when I was in graduate school, I had this fear of nuclear annihilation. All it would take would be one mistake, and we've learned there were so many near misses for the world falling into total nuclear annihilation. Remember one day, as a graduate school, towards the end of the quarter, where I had all sorts of tests due and papers due, I was listening to NPR on the radio, and they had some very, very well-known federal official on the line talking to him. And he said that the chances of nuclear annihilation within the next 10 years are more than 50%. And I said, what am I doing trying to get this graduate degree? It seems worthless. And so this stuck with me, even into the time of getting married. Should we have kids if we're going to bring them into a world of nuclear annihilation? And then, of course, Reagan was elected. And he had Star Wars and this whole buildup of the nuclear capability. I said, it's going to be worse. And I was among a group of UU ministers who were invited to the White House to hear his point of view on this from his associates. And they claimed a rosier future. And I said, how's this going to be? It's just going to be the Soviet Union matching what we're doing. It's going to be even worse. And then Reagan, of course, said in Berlin, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I said, that is the most foolish thing I've ever heard. But it happened, didn't it? The Soviet Union went away. There was a rapprochement between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. They no longer had these submarines going along the East Coast targeting us. And I breathed a sigh of relief, and I was astounded. How can this possibly have happened? And whenever I want to have a good wine and astonishment experience, I just allow myself to go back to that era. And when I think things are impossible, maybe not. Maybe not. At least I can exult in the fact that I'm no longer daily fearing nuclear annihilation. So that is the first thing that comes to my mind personally. The second thing that comes to mind is the wine of astonishment as I have read and contemplating the thought of two of the great prominent atheists of our time. And I didn't expect this in reading their books. Richard Dawkins, of course, of Oxford University, has written many books. I've read two of them, but the one I particularly remember is On Weaving the Rainbow, Science, Delusion, and the Appetite for Wonder. And, of course, he goes through the whole history of our solar system and planet, solar system between 10 and 20 billion years ago, and our planet 4 billion years. And he said, you know, the time distance between your shoulder and your elbow is a time of bacteria. That's all there was. And then when you go further down your arm on the timeline, invertebrate life begins. And then you get dinosaurs when you get down to your palm. And he said, you get to Homo sapiens and our predecessor, Homo erectus, in one nail clipping of time. One nail clipping of time. All this development of human beings. And he goes over and over again about all the wonderful, awe-inspiring aspects of the human body. But one that I recall, and of course experience every day, is when you move your eyes, there's a retinal change in the image on your retina, as if you're part of an earthquake, because it goes up, you know, what's on the back of your retina? It goes up and down, like, or sideways, like an earthquake. But the brain gives you a steady vision of your experience. I look around like this, and the earth stays steady. Isn't that amazing that the brain has that capability? And just a couple weeks ago, I read in the New York Times an article by Daniel Dennett of Tufts University. And he said, each cell is a living agent of its own. It has a sort of agenda. It's trying to stay alive. It's got to keep itself a supply of energy within the human body to keep going. It's got a metabolism. It's the descendant of a long ancestry of free-floating living cells that had to fend for themselves. And they've all joined forces to make a multicellular body. They are little robots. This was in reference to, robots taking over. Well, robots are in our bodies. If you look inside them, how do they move? How do neurons reach out and grab other neurons and send signals to them? They've got trillions of motor proteins, and motor proteins are not alive. They're macromolecules. They march along on these little highways on the brain, carrying things around. They're porters. They carry the necessary materials to keep the cell going and to repair and extend its dendrites. Ribosomes aren't alive. Life couldn't exist without these little molecular machines by the trillions. They are working in your body right now. Human life and human consciousness are made possible by these incredibly brilliant consortium of little robots. And he goes on to say, what I want to show people is, look, the magic of life has evolved. The magic of brains are evolving in between your own ears, and that's thrilling. It's affirming. Right this second, it's happening to all of us. You don't need miracles. You just need to understand the world the way it really is. And it's unbelievably wonderful. We're so lucky to be alive. The anxiety that people feel about giving up their traditional magical operations, I take that very seriously. I can feel that anxiety. But the more I understood about the things I didn't understand, the more the anxiety ebbed. The more the joy, the wondrousness came back. At the end of Darwin's dangerous idea, that's one of his works, I have my little hymn to life in the universe. That's my God, more wonderful than anything I could imagine in detail, but not magical. I just love that quote. And of course, Walt Whitman retained the word magic, saying, I know nothing else but miracles, whether I walk the streets of Manhattan or dart my sight over the roofs of houses toward the sky, or wade with naked feet along the beach just in the edge of the water, or stand under the trees in the woods, or talk by day with anyone I love, or sleep in bed at night with anyone I love, or sit at a table at dinner with the rest, or look at strangers opposite me riding in the streetcar, or watch honeybees busy around the hive of a summer forenoon, or animals feeding in the fields, or birds, or the wonderfulness of insects in the air, or the exquisite, delicate curve of the new moon in spring. These, with the rest, one and all, are to me miracles. To me, every hour of the light and dark is a miracle. Every cubic inch of space is a miracle. Every yard of the surface of the earth is spread with miracles. Very true for me, too. If you stop and consider it, and you look with discernment, you will be astonished. And third, I imagine the astonishment of people from 200 years ago or so coming back to life and experiencing what we experience, how astounded they would be. Pain-free or near pain-free dentistry compared to what people had to put up with, right? All the advances in medicine, the millions of pieces of music which are immediately available to me on my phone. The communication instantly that I have with my son and daughter anytime I want it. all of the knowledge at our fingertips, do you think how astounded they would be? Or common everyday things like sewage systems, or indoor plumbing, or the fact that I can set my thermostat at 77 and keep it there forever. Can you imagine how astounded they would be? And maybe the everydayness of these things doesn't allow us to be astounded, but we might be if we would think of it. You know, a few months ago, we changed our family plan on phones from Verizon to T-Mobile. I was going through a mall, and the salesman talked me into it. And we would get all these free things, and we get Netflix, and we get new phones, and but I had him write it all down, so we had it in writing. And then they didn't follow through. And we got charged $50 more a month than what we said we were going to get, and they didn't follow through on the proper payment for my kids' phones. And I called 2 or 3 times to no avail. And my son finally said, well, Dad, let me give a shot at it. And he wrote this letter, this most wonderful customer complaint letter I've ever read in my life. And all of a sudden, things started to change. We went up the chain, I guess, of their complaint department by 2 or 3 people. And this woman called me, and she's been in constant contact with me until everything has been changed to our satisfaction. And I called David, and I said, thanks for that letter. That was such a great letter. He said, I used AI. And I said, that's amazing. He said, I put in all the aspects of the contract and our dissatisfaction and everything, and had AI write that letter. And can you imagine the astonishment I felt and the pride I felt in my son? He's beginning to use that in his architectural practice, too. One of the, of course, awe-inspiring blessings of our age. You know, our Puritan forebears had tasted the bitter wine of astonishment at their losses during their first months in the New World. More than half of their number had died in their first year in the New World. Can you imagine the bitter wine of astonishment they experienced? But yet, they celebrated with astonishment positively at the fact that they had survived, that their New World experiment was going to continue, and so they celebrated with Native Americans. Their crops were successful. Their first crops were successful. They thanked their God that they had made it. And so we do enter a time of celebration, do we not, with Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and solstice and Christmas and Kwanzaa. A time, I think, of amazement at what life has afforded us. I like what Scott Alexander, Minister Emeritus of our Vero Beach congregation, wrote a number of years ago. He said, look at the beautifully, richly textured life you have. Look at the intriguing and interesting world that surrounds you. Look at all of the nature which embraces you so gently and faithfully. Look at the fascinating dance of persons around you. Look at the generous miracle of your family and friends. Look at the seemingly endless supply of intriguing human companions that have scattered along your way. And look at the incredible beauty and rich texture and simple blessings that lies all around you. Look and taste the wine of astonishment. So may it be.